Pooh to Possum Magic. With great respect to that classic picture book, I say Pooh to Possum Magic. My point being that the animals we celebrate in fiction have little to do with reality. Beatrix Potter's rabbits might be lovable pets, but we don't want them roaming around our backyards or prowling our bush blocks. No one wants to find a real Pooh Bear or Mr. Toad in their living room. The thing is, I defy anyone to find anything magical in possums. That's because of all our native fauna, they are the most irritating. Total exhibitionists with no sense of propriety. They mate outside my bedroom window in the early hours of the morning. I wouldn't mind if while they were doing it, they didn't create an ear-splitting din. Sometimes in their sexual ecstasy, they run up and down my flywire screen. One day I know they're going to crash right through. More annoyingly, they dine on my favourite trees, in the process reducing them to leafless skeletons. One in particular figures large on their menu. A shady blackwood bearing a pretty purple flower in spring. It's supposed to shade our balcony. So far, we've tried every possible way to protect the foliage from those pillaging plunderers. So far, nothing has worked. We've chopped any branch a possum can possibly reach, placed perspex sheets around the trunk, and sprayed the foliage with anti-poss. Remember that saying, everything but the kitchen sink? Desperate, we once tied a discarded laundry trough to the trunk. The possums giggled like mad as they climbed over it. When we trapped and carried the offenders to a more possum-friendly destination, it turned out that another generation had been waiting to move in. Not everyone has this negative attitude. I've a friend who all summer has one living in her wood stove. Her Christmas cards feature this critter in a Santa Claus hat. Come winter, she gently ushers it outside. In this country, possums are protected and we're not allowed to destroy them. But clever New Zealanders know how to process possum fur. Enough said? Locals versus Tent City. At the risk of sounding curmudgeonly, my least favourite times are those months between Christmas and the end of Easter. The rest of the year, this rural area is totally mine, except for those few locals who have the decency to stay out of sight. Winter is when our bush tracks are home to echidnas, blue-tongued lizards, snakes, wombats, and 1,000,000,000,000 ants. When seagulls and herons roosting on our rock shelves hang out their wings like washing to dry. When our deserted beaches welcome any walker who doesn't mind being blown about by an Antarctic wind. Boxing Day, however, our foreshore turns into Tent City. Now don't get me wrong, I've nothing per se against caravans, tents, annexes, barbecues, four-wheel drives and such like. Not if they stay in their rightful place. It's just that they are so pervasive, so unavoidable, so in your face. Walk along a bush track and sooner or later you'll blunder into a stranger. Then it seems churlish not to exchange a greeting and maybe a few comments about the weather. At least that's all. Thank heavens for Anglo-Saxon reticence. Or try jollying yourself down to the beach where, in exchange for gulls, short-tailed shearwaters, and other birds too numerous to mention, our stretch of sand is filled with surfers, surfing equipment, sunbathers, fishing boats, children, beach umbrellas, and dogs. My jaundiced eye picks up caravans perched high on the hill overlooking the beach. Settled onto a cliff with $1,000,000 view, they cost their owners a few dollars, where we locals must pay squillions in rates for our bush blocks. Even our local food store undergoes some metamorphosis. From a sleepy little shop where everyone had time to chat, it turns into a gung-ho establishment where, if we don't turn up at break of dawn, our daily newspaper, milk and bread has been sold out. If you think this is merely a selfish desire to keep this place sacrosanct, you're right. If too many people become entranced by it, they might buy in, and then where will we be? Not in any hideaway, that's for sure. A diet for dingoes. 2 dingoes live just down the road from our bush hideaway. Sometimes of an evening we hear their distinctive wail. It reminds us of what this area was like before we Europeans turned up to mess things around. Mother and son, the dingoes are walked every day on a 2-dog leash. Beautiful creatures with coats ranging between the palest beige to the softest brown, they're slim and athletic, every muscle and limb in perfect working order. Whenever we meet, I'm careful not to approach too rapidly or look them straight in the eye. They are, after all, warrigals, which is the proper name for a wild dog, and regarded by some as the possible antecedent of the wolf. For years my imagination saw them as living off whatever animal had the temerity to wander into their backyard. Surely their diet was a slab of raw meat supplemented by the odd possum or rabbit. But apart from greeting their young owner with a friendly nod as we passed each other on the road, we never got around to talking. However, the other day I stopped long enough to admire these splendid animals and ask their owner what they ate. Imagine my astonishment when she said, "They have terrible food allergies. I have to buy special food that only my vet can supply. You wouldn't believe how expensive they are to maintain." This led me to muse about the effect civilization has had on other native fauna. Though these dingoes might seem in the pink of condition, removing them from their natural habitat has proved disastrous. Their natural diet is kangaroo, wallaby, lizard and snake, all animals with low body fat content. Yet some of our other natives have adapted more easily. Some have even used us productively. Parrots, magpies and thrushes turn up in droves to beg for food. Indigenous bush rats live in our ceiling. Once we even came across a mother bush rat making a nest for her babies by eating into an old blanket. If that isn't clever adaptation to change, I don't know what is. Albino and other birds. It's hard to think about anything good coming out of a prolonged drought, except for the birds. Though our bush block was as dry as the proverbial bone and some of our trees suffering so badly, I wondered if the fig tree would ever recover. But we have now a semi-permanent colony of bellbirds and are visited by numerous flocks of finches, yellow-crested cockatoos and rosellas. Noisy creatures that enjoy hanging out together, they fly here to feed on our grass and flowering gums and bushes. The rosellas wear myriad outfits that seem to my untrained eye to contain all the greens, yellows, reds and browns that nature comes up with. Gregarious to their wingtips, their call produces an amazingly sweet cacophony. All in all, they get on remarkably well. I can only guess that this convivial group behaviour is part of their survival instinct. However, the other day, a flock of parrots with green backs and red, orange and blue bellies fluttered in to roost in one of our trees. What had me staring was a brilliant, omo white bright bird. Only his shape and hint of colour circling his eyes told me he was part of this flock. Until then, I had always believed that albinos were invariably shunned. Here this was not the case. This bird was busy sharing calls with his mates as if there was nothing unusual about him. It led me to ponder on how more sensible birds are than us humans. A nonconformist may be the bread and butter of the media, but they're singled out for criticism in most small communities. If their behaviour becomes intrusive or harmful, this is well deserved. But if it's just an odd little quirk like loudly complaining about the way some local dogs bark at pedestrians, or horses being walked along tracks clearly marked with a no horses sign, or wondering why neighbours must run their ride-on mowers at the crack of dawn, surely we can learn something from the birds.